Curator of Decorative Arts here at the New York Museum of Art. Before we begin, please feel free to ask questions in the Q&A format of the Zoom or the streaming formats. So the Q&A section, and we will have some time after the presentation to take some questions. Before introducing Dr. Wenzel, I'd like to show you a few examples. And let's see, a few examples here. Thank you. Of works from the New York Museum of Art's collection. The New York Museum of Art's Decorative Arts collection has works made and used by Jewish artists over the centuries, from near and far, not just American objects. And here you see two works connected to the Bezalel School of Jerusalem. And this was an arts and crafts school in the 20th century in several various formats, manifestations that focused on creating handcrafted works and creating a Jewish style, at first in really looking towards ancient traditions, and then later in the history of the school, more of a modernist style. And then continues today in its third manifestation as the premier design and art school. And so on the left, you can see a rug made at the Bezalel School early in its history, about 1913, with the design of a menorah. And on the right, you can see a silver menorah by Ludwig Volpert, who made it in 1956 in Jerusalem. He had come from Frankfurt and studied in the modernist design schools there, connected to the Bauhaus, and then escaped Germany in the 30s and went to Jerusalem, where he worked with and taught at the Bezalel School, and really brought this modernist design sensibility to works of Jewish religious and secular objects, and then came to New York City, where he worked with the Toby Posh workshop at the Jewish Museum in New York. And both of these objects came to the New York Museum as purchases and gifts early in the life of the object. So really allowing the museum to locally and virtually show the history of this school. And here we also have works, both historic and contemporary. And these two works connect to local New York and New Jersey history. Meyer Myers on the left, this is a coffee pot. Meyer Myers was a prominent colonial New York Jewish silversmith, and he worked both independently and in partnership with Benjamin Halstead, a Christian silversmith who was based both in New York and New Jersey. And so they expanded their business through their partnership and created this lovely coffee pot from the mid-18th century. And on the right, we have a Bessemer space box that was designed by Tommy Gelb, who worked on both the World Trade Towers at the World Trade Center and on the Freedom Tower. And so he wanted to honor the memory of all those who perished on 9/11, and also thinking kind of greater historical loss in terms of the Holocaust and genocides worldwide. But this particular specimen is in the form of the Freedom Tower currently in New York. And so this just gives you an overview of what we have here. But really our focus today is Dr. Mirjam Wenzel, Director of the Jewish Museum of Frankfurt since 2016, and she will be speaking with us about memory, remembrance, and art. So all these things that we have just looked at. And Dr. Wenzel has written many books, articles, and publications about German Jewish art and culture, as well as the greater Jewish community in terms of these topics. And she also curated many exhibitions before her time, and currently at the Jewish Museum in Frankfurt. So I'd like to welcome Dr. Wenzel and look forward to your presentation.
Well, thank you very much, Amy, for your kind introduction, and thank you very much for the opportunity to present the Jewish Museum Frankfurt and its work to you overseas. It's here in Frankfurt, it's evening. So I guess you are doing a lunch break, but it's really my pleasure to give you a short introduction into who we are and the changes we've been through. The Jewish Museum in Frankfurt is the oldest Jewish museum in the Federal Republic of Germany after the Holocaust. It was founded in the 80s and opened in 1988. We have two locations, and I'm saying always we have 3 platforms, one of them being online, like the one we are talking right now, but we have 2 specific sites, one being the Museum Judengasse, which was established in 1992, and the other one being the Rothschild Palais, which is our main building, where I'm also sitting right now, and you see it in the back, in my back as well. So the Rothschild Palais is one of the palais that is situated on the Main River. It was one of the places where the Rothschild family was living and where they donated the first public library for arts and sciences of the city of Frankfurt at the end of the 19th century. You see here the main reading room of the Rothschild Palais down there. And after the destruction due to the Nazi times, the Rothschild Palais became a collecting point of the US Army, Frankfurt being the headquarters of the US Army. So in the Rothschild Palais, there were gathered all Jewish books, some ceremonial objects that were then restituted in the name of the murdered to Jewish organizations abroad, most of them being in the US. So if you want to see the precious productions, especially of Jewish ceremonial art, you can go to the New York Museum, obviously, but you can also go to the Jewish Museum New York. They hold quite some artifacts that were produced in Frankfurt in modern times. The second location, our Museum Judengasse, is situated at a contested site as well. It's at the site of the oldest Jewish ghetto in Europe, the ghetto of Frankfurt's Judengasse, which was established 50 years before the ghetto of Venice. And in the 80s, the city of Frankfurt decided to build on the site a house for an administrative building, actually for the gas distribution of the town. And so then there were fierce protests because when they were digging into the ground, they found the remnants of 19 houses of the Jewish ghetto, and the city kept on building the house and destroying those remnants. So the protesters were actually squattering the site in order that the memory should be kept. It was a fierce conflict in 1987 that was meaningful for the whole Federal Republic of Germany because the topic was how to refer to what remained from Jewish life before Nazi times, and what is the responsibility of Germany towards this heritage. I'm showing you a film introducing you to the Museum Judengasse. You hear it?
In 1460, the Frankfurt Town Council decided to resettle the Jewish population to a segregated area. The first Jewish ghetto in Europe, as it was later referred to, was established. At first, only a few families lived in the narrow lane along the old town wall, but their number gradually increased over the years. In the 17th century, roughly 3,000 people lived here. Frankfurt's Judengasse became an epicenter of Jewish life in Europe. 300 years later, the foundation walls of this lane were discovered when constructing an office building. After a public outcry, a museum was set up showing some of the finds. In 2016, this museum was given a new look. The entrance is now directly next to the old Jewish cemetery in Batonstrasse. In the exhibition, you can see valuable objects alongside the archaeological finds and experience how Jews once lived in Frankfurt. We look forward to your visit.
So, when you visit the Museum Judengasse, this is the first room you will see, and at this room, we actually tell the story of this contested site. We tell the story of destruction in Nazi times, of the fight for memory, and of this particular conflict, which you see in the back. This is a look into the permanent exhibition and into the remnants of 5 houses, or the archaeological finds of 5 houses of the Judengasse. And as you can see, we present on the site objects that were once used or produced in the Judengasse itself. Here, for example, you have this beautiful Hanukkah lamp from the 17th century. You have actually the first painting of a Frankfurt Jew. He is a great uncle of Anne Frank. Anne Frank was born in Frankfurt. Süskind Stern, he owned one of the houses that we are presenting. And you also see on the right-hand side, you see the scissors. So these were archaeological findings when the whole site was found. And we try to tell the story here of those Jewish families that, you know, were not wealthy and really fought for their living. And so that's the story of a widow that was upcycling old clothes to make a living. What we do on site is we use the site for events. This is a reading, for instance, or we do concerts. We figured out that the acoustic is very beautiful on site, and we do concerts with old music that was once played on site. We give tours through the old cemetery, and we do dinners based on recipes that remain from this time. So we are cooking, for instance, this is a Rothschild dinner. The Bank of Rothschild was founded in the Judengasse, and so we cook a recipe like it might have tasted like in these times. These are some views of this old cemetery. It's one of the oldest cemetery north of the Alps, the oldest gravestone being from 1272. And you see what is peculiar about this cemetery is you see the signs of the houses and of the families at the top. And those signs are often related to the names of the family. So this is something you will find only in Frankfurt. Around the cemetery, there is a commemoration site commemorating the names of about 12,000 Jewish residents that were deported and murdered in Nazi times. And we continuously do research on their biographies, and their biographies will be published this year online in a digital memorial. In the renewal period that we've now been through, we had 5 years where our main location, the Rothschild Palais, was closed, and where we had the Museum Judengasse, and we totally reinvented ourselves. And we did a lot of pop-up projects. This was the first one. It was a pop-up boat on the main river. We did public events on site, kind of festival like concerts, discussions, screenings, and at the main focus were workshops where we were presenting parts of our collections and discussing what might be interesting for people. And also discussing topics like inclusion and, you know, new approaches for the new permanent exhibition. A year later, we did a second pop-up exhibition that's now closer to our museum, with this inflatable. And we invited the public to co-create the space itself. And we introduced about 50 personalities from the Jewish history of Frankfurt to the public and asked them, whom do you want to get to know closer? And in both cases, also in the case of this participatory display and this table that I just presented to you, the audience told us that they want to get to know Berta Pappenheim. A closer Berta Pappenheim was a feminist. She was the founder of the Jewish women's movement. She's better known as Anna O, as the first woman that was hysteria, that was diagnosed hysteria and got into treatment by Joseph Breuer and Sigmund Freud. That's what she's known for under this pseudonym. But later on, when she actually started working and did a lot of social work, she became a really important figure for the kind of reinvention of a Jewish tradition at the beginning of 20th century. Due to these workshops that we did in this pop-up platforms, we defined the key messages that we wanted to come across with in our new permanent exhibition. Here you have them. Frankfurt was a thriving center of Jewish culture in Europe, both in early modern times, in the Judengasse, and in modern times, the time of the Rothschild Palais, where our main building is. Jews have shaped the development and modernization of the city. Jewish culture is diverse and constantly changing, and one can only understand the local culture in a European frame of migration and of conflict and violence, and the fight for participation. These are the key messages that you will find in both our locations in the permanent exhibitions. That was our campaign for the opening. We opened on 20th October 2020. We were open for 11 days and then we had to close due to the pandemic. So you see here the main slogan for our campaign was "We are now," and I'm showing you the campaign movie, which is in German, but I think you'll understand the message.
Ein neues Haus, ohne Mauern, mit neuen Themen und neuen Perspektiven, ausgehend von der Gegenwart, die Geschichte im Blick, die Zukunft vor uns. Was bedeutet Zusammenleben? Was bewegt uns? Welche Zukunft wollen wir gestalten? Wir sind jetzt Jüdisches Museum Frankfurt.
So in this movie and in the whole campaign, we were really focusing on the now and on the question of how do we want to live together. Because we really feel this is at the core of our mission of today. It's commemorating the past vis-a-vis the future. And so that's how we wanted to come over the image of being a memorial site, but including acts of memory in the question of how do we shape our future, our common future in diverse society. That was what we were, putting out there with this campaign. You see on the left-hand side, you see our opening a ceremony, and because of the pandemic, we had to do a lot of things outside. And it was very beautiful as long as we could do them. And it was for us, as you can imagine, a little harmful to, after 5 years of closure, only to open for 11 days. I'm showing you now some archaeological architectural highlights of the new building. So these are the views and staircases, if you look up. This is the main foyer. This is our daily. We are the first Jewish museum in Germany that has a kosher milky daily, and we work a lot with sensual approaches towards Jewish culture. So we include eating and food in our approaches in education. This is our library on the left-hand side, which is a public place too. You can come and study there. We do a lot of workshops with children in the library, and our bookshop on the right-hand side. And here you see the third floor of our permanent exhibition. The permanent exhibition in the Rothschild Palais is focusing on, it's called We Are Now, Jewish Frankfurt from Emancipation until today. And we start with the present, that's on the right-hand side. And here you see the view of the third floor, where we tell the story of 200 years Jewish history and culture in Frankfurt in a thematic form. It's not chronological. This is the second floor. It's called Tradition and Ritual. And here it's really meaningful for us to raise different approaches towards Jewish culture. You see, for instance, on the right-hand side, interviews. These are 5 rabbis from Frankfurt from different streams, and we ask them questions that are controversial, like how do you deal with homosexuality, or what is Jewish for you? And so these kind of questions, and they answer it. And on the left-hand side, you see a room where we tell the story of the split of the community in 19th century. Frankfurt is the place where modern Orthodoxy was founded by Samson Raphael Hirsch due to a split in the community, because the main community got very liberal. Here you see the first floor. In the first floor, we tell the story of 3 Frankfurt family, 2 of them being rather known worldwide. That's the family Rothschild and the family of Anne Frank. We always tell the story over several generations and in a rather intimate form, I would say. So you have the opportunity to get to know personal letters, get to know recipes, what the family once owned. And we are in the unique position that the family of Anne Frank gave to us all their personal belongings, so that we can actually tell the family story, how Anna was raised. And if you know the family story a little better, you also understand why this 13-year-old girl could write a diary the way she did. So coming to art, we have art galleries. This is our Moritania Oppenheim gallery, reflecting the process of Jewish emancipation. And in 19th century, on the right-hand side, this is a contemporary sculpture by Niralon, reflecting on the instability of Jewish life in 20th and 21st century. And that refers to on our entrance sculpture. That's the sculpture done by Ariel Schlesinger for this place. It's his first sculpture in public space, and it has these 2 trees, one holding the other, and with the roots up to the sky. A very poetic sculpture. And which became a photo hotspot, actually. And on the right-hand side, you see it's an American Jewish artist, Rachel Cantor. She did this talit, and the images, if you look closer, are images from the civil rights movement, as well as the women's movement in the US. So referring to these movements, she designed this talit, prayer shawl, I think would be the translation. Last but not least, it's very meaningful for us. As I said, our third platform is online. That's also where we have the largest audience. And we invented a particular gift for our new building, this gift being this card. It's the card in the form of a bookmark, and when you get it for free at the entrance, and you can collect items with it. I'm showing how it works. So thank you for listening, and I think I stopped the sharing now so that we can talk. Amy, you're muted.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry about that. I'm having, as always, a technical moment. So thanks for your patience, but thank you so much. That was fascinating to learn about the history of both the Jewish community in Frankfurt and the history of the museum and how it has evolved. And I see one person just already popped up a question and wanted to know, how big is the Jewish community in Frankfurt now?
It has about 7,000 members. All in all, the Jewish community in Germany today is about 90,000 members, but there is probably more than 100,000 Jews not being part of the community in Germany, and so and that's a new development. In the 90s, there was a large migration of Jews from the post-Soviet countries, and about 220,000 moved into Germany. And since then, there really is a vivid presence or a vivid contemporary Jewish life, and a very diverse one.
Right. I was thinking of diversity, thinking of all those different communities that have emigrated there. So very vibrant. And jumping backwards, I'm reading the questions here. So thanks to the audience for sending them. Someone was interested. You mentioned the Schlesinger tree sculpture in the entrance and behind you in the slide. And someone wants to know if you could explain a little bit more about the meaning of them with those trees inverted there.
Well, first of all, the tree is a metaphor in the Bible, a metaphor for, and in Jewish tradition, a metaphor for life. And so that's the first reference. The second reference, it's the uprooted tree, a kind of a metaphor for exile and for the fact that there is 850 years of Jewish life in Frankfurt. Nevertheless, there is large exiled Frankfurt communities, and some Frankfurt traditions went on abroad, not here. The community that was founded here again was a community of displaced persons, yes, Polish background. So exile, migration, forced migration, the feeling of not belonging or between belonging and belonging is part of Jewish experience of modern times. And I think that's the whole kind of metaphor. The tree itself, if you look exactly, you see it's not rooted.
Right.
It's a kind of, it's not clear whether it might, and that's also part of the symbolism.
Right, that instability. Thank you so much for going more deeply into that and kind of thinking about all of the ideas that you talked about, and also so that uprootedness and many different communities coming together, and the original Frankfurt community being uprooted and spread out around the world for those survivors. But someone else wants to know, were there any figures in your audience outreach and that collaborative participatory project with your pop-up? Were there any figures, people that you were surprised that the public wanted to know more about?
Beta Oppenheim was not introduced by us. We introduced persons that had a closer connection to our collection and to the history of the museum, or like Ludwig Meitner, for instance, whom you might know as a known expressionist, where we hold, also it's a real focus. We introduced these kind of personalities, and with an introduction. inspired the audience. Writing the name got them the most of the votes. So that was really a surprise, a moment. So for us, we really feel we had to take that serious, that there was such a demand to know more about her.
Right. And so it is fascinating that, right, it bubbled up from the community itself. And I know the way museums work in that you did all that research and you established your exhibitions, but have you have more names come up, or have you done any outreach to continue that project, or what other response have you received from the exhibitions as they are now installed?
There was another surprise moment, as you might know or heard of. In Germany, we have not only one U. The Mr. and Mrs. form and the surname form relates to different U's. And it's always a question how you talk to your audience, how you address them, whether in the rather formal way or the informal way.
Right.
And we have a tendency to address in a formal way. But one of the outcomes of our workshop was that the audience didn't want to be addressed in a formal way. So they really went for the, Mirjam, the surname way. And we took that serious. So in our exhibition, especially, there is participatory walls, and there we really use this form because we also understood that it's more engaging than the formal form.
Right, much more personal. And that leads right into another question that someone asked: how do you navigate the different learning or experiential needs of your Jewish and your non-Jewish audience? So again, thinking of the diversity of your audience, both in their religious background, their personal background, or the way that they learn and take in information.
Well, we have about probably 10% of our visitors are Jewish, the rest are not Jewish. Mm-hmm. And we really think it's part of our political agenda, actually, to introduce Jewish history and culture, and the question of remembrance, and the question of how we want to live together in a diverse society to a non-Jewish audience. Right. And so our whole we developed in the process of developing the exhibition. We were working with design thinking, which is a method that comes from software design. And at the core of design thinking stands the question: who's your audience? For whom are you doing it? And so we came up with 8 particular personas, or 8 particular target groups that we want to address. And with these target groups, we also did the workshops. And the target groups, they are based on our visitor research on the one hand, but some of them are also target groups we want to have. Like, for instance, we want to reach out to the Turkish community and get them involved with the museums. And so we have an outreach program and education that is directed to students from, let's say, a background they've never been to museums beforehand, and we want to get them involved with our museum and with our topics, and later on make them to peer educators even. And so that they give tours for their families. And so that was we really thought a lot about that. What is their interest? What are the rooms? In our heads, we were working through the rooms with these 8 personas and always thinking, okay, this might be of particular interest for them. And now we need to verify whether we were right.
Right. Well, it's just that way of reaching out to the community, and then having those student educators. And so that leads to several people wanted to know how many school groups visit, and also are the public school students in grade school taught about the Holocaust, and how would that tie into your work?
Well, first of all, about 1/3 of our visitors are the school groups. And usually in ninth grade, there is the Holocaust and National Socialism is part of the historical educations, and also already in sixth grade, but they are more on the part of religion. So they come in the frame of these curricular, the school groups, but we also try to get them to reach out to them in other frames, because for us it's really meaningful that they come, that they don't only address Jewish culture as a dead culture or as a culture of the murdered. So we really try we are a vivid center, and so we really try to reach out to school groups in that frame. And there is another shift that is meaningful for us. We don't think that the approach to see Jews only as victims of the Shoah is necessarily the right approach. We also think that agency and empowerment today, and particularly the question of what should have happened so that history would have taken another turn. That is, politically speaking, the much more important question today, we think. And so we actually try to reach out to school groups in other frames and with other questions than only in the frame of Holocaust education.
Right. And it's all communities move forward, so they're not just defined by the past. And several people did ask about the incidence of anti-Semitism today in Frankfurt, and that ties right into bringing in school groups and thinking about the present as well as the past.
Yes, well, that's a really a development that is matters a lot to us. When I came here in 2016, we hardly had security. It was only a bit security. Right now, we are under there is a police car always in front. There is people with guns, and so we are at a total different situation, and so what we try is, our slogan always was, we are a museum without walls. So we try to reach out and be out there, stay courageous, don't be frightened or anything, but it's of course not always easy. And there has been, you probably heard of an attack in the synagogue of Halle on Yom Kippur more than 2 years ago. So right now in our permanent exhibition on the second floor, where we address tradition and ritual, we asked an artist that was in the synagogue, Talia Feldman. She's a US-based artist, and she did a beautiful sound installation, recording all the prayers, recording 10 prayers that were in the synagogue, with songs that you sing on Yom Kippur. And so the recordings of these songs are on display in our permanent exhibition.
Wonderful. So again, tying it back and forth and the kind of through the lens of contemporary artists. And several people have written in to say that they really appreciate this overview of the museum and the thoughtfulness that you've really developed these programs. And we have a couple specific or more practical questions. I think people are always hopeful we can visit it in the future, in the short future. And how far apart are your two museum locations? And is it walkable? How does that work?
Yes, it's walking distance. If you walk, it will be about 20 minutes. There is a tram, or you can walk down the Main River. That's actually really beautiful. And what is interesting is that between our two locations, there is the center of the city of Frankfurt, with, for instance, the Paulskirche, where the first kind of democratic convention took place. And there is also the medieval town, which was recently reconstructed. And in this medieval town, there was the medieval Jewish community right beside the main cathedral. So a next step of ours will be to offer a media walk that you can, better understand what actually the traces of Jewish history in between our two buildings.
Wonderful. And someone did ask if there was a tour of the old cemetery. And so it sounds like this walking tour will tie in these locations.
Yes, and there is the old cemetery is included in our audio tour through Museum Judengasse. So when you download the app, you will get to know the old cemetery as well.
Wonderful, and I think people were fascinated about the tours as well as the recipes you mentioned, and several people have asked where they could access the recipes or even the videos that you showed. We did put for the audience, we put the Jewish Museum Frankfurt's website address in the chat so that you can access that. But are the recipes or some of these videos accessible through your website?
Well, some videos are accessible through the website or through the YouTube channel, but the particular idea of this item is really that, it's a gift for those who come and visit us on site. And it's this idea of the post-digital museum, that
Yes.
there is digital offerings that are related to the site and that we want to stay in contact. So the recipes, we do sometimes share them on our social media channels, some of the recipes, and they are also part of how we present Family Frank, for instance, and so on. But yes, if you want to have a closer look, you need to come.
Wonderful. Well, I think being an object-related curator, I completely understand that. We want people to experience the programs and the events virtually, but yes, and several people did comment on your bookmark idea. So I hope we will all be able to travel soon so that many of our attendees here will be able to come and get their bookmark and collect those recipes and perhaps even experience one of your dinners or meals. There's so many wonderful questions. I know we don't have much more time. I have one very kind of specific question about the history that you started out with, and how did the Jewish ghetto come to close? When you said, were there liberalization, reduction of the rules or those laws?
Yes, I mean, that's, enlightenment is a French idea, and it came with Napoleon. So Napoleon was bombarding the city of Frankfurt and bombarding the Judengasse, and after that, the need to settle in the Judengasse was not reestablished by the city of Frankfurt. It was never something that the Jewish community was, always fighting against that forced settlement and the closure that the Judengasse had and Christian holidays and on Sundays. And yes, due to Napoleon, the whole idea of equal rights for Jews came for a short time and was later on, that's the big fight of 19th century, was later on at the second part of 19th century reestablished again.
Well, thank you for that little historic detail as well. But I think judging from the comments and responses to your questions, responses to your presentation is that this idea of talking about the past, but really bringing it to the present and what is the present community. And again, not just being defined by the past. So I think we'll bring this to a close, unfortunately, because there's so many wonderful questions, and you just have, I think, this idea of reaching out to the community, the way that you and your team have worked together to bring in the community in so many different ways, and learn about people that they brought to your attention, as well as all your activities. So I hope for all of our sakes that we're able to come visit you in Frankfurt soon, but thank you so much for sharing this information. And we look forward to seeing you online or in person someday in the future. So thank you everyone for participating. And I think we have a slide to give information about our upcoming programs. But most of all, Dr. Wenzel, thank you so much for participating today. This has been a wonderful opportunity to meet you here.
Well, thank you. It was a real pleasure talking to you. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And thank you everyone in the audience. And we look forward to seeing you virtually or online in the future. So have a good afternoon or evening or morning, wherever you're located. Thank you. And thank you, Dr. Wenzel.